Hello again. In today's video, I'm going to demonstrate how to use the NewGene software to output data. Now to begin, one will want to make sure that NewGene is open on their desktop. The next step is once NewGene is open, you'll want to see that you've selected the Create Output Dataset tab and then the Select Variables in Time Range tab. Once you've chosen those tabs, you'll want to come up to the time range selection options. And it's worth taking a moment to discuss these options. NewGene, the original version of this software, only gave the user the ability to select a year. But as you can see, NewGene gives the user the ability to select the month, day, and year. It also gives the user the ability to select the time, though currently none of the preloaded data sets actually use that option. However, as I've mentioned in previous videos, part of our intention with NewGene is to give users maximum flexibility with the type of data set that they may want to incorporate. For the purposes of today's example, we're going to only be working with yearly data. And indeed, we're only going to work with yearly data and for a short time range. So I'm going to leave this at 1900. And then if I move over to the ending date, I'm going to leave this at 1920. And even though the month and the day are specified, NewGene will recognize that I'm only working with yearly data. The next step is to move over to the left-hand side here where it says Variables. Underneath Variables, there's a listing of categories of various variables that have been loaded into NewGene. Some of this data was preloaded. Some of this is data that the user has inputted after they've installed NewGene. For the purposes of today's example, we're going to use the sync score data. In particular, we're going to select just three variables: C code, year, and military expenditure. At this point, it's important to notice two things. First of all, when I selected C code, if you move to the top of the screen, you'll see that this box opened. The box says Number Country Code Columns with a 2. And to the right are these two arrows. What these arrows allow the user to do is either decrease or increase the number of country code columns that will be included in an observation. So for example, if you wish to have a monadic data set, you would select 1. If you wish to have a dyadic data set, which we're going to use today, you would have a 2. Alternatively, if you wish to have a triadic data set, you would move to 3 or 4 or 5, etc. But again, for the purposes of today's data set, or today's example, we're going to just use 2. The second thing that you should notice is that if you come over to the variable summary section, which is on the right hand side, if you scroll down, you'll see that under sync scores, it is inserted C code, year, and military expenditure. This indicates that these are the three variables that have been selected from the sync score options, the sync score variable options. If we had chosen variables from the country, then those would be reported here. If we had selected variables from leader data, it would be reported here. But this provides the user a quick overview of all the variables they've chosen to include in their data set. Once these options have been chosen, the user will now want to select the Prepare Run tab. Once they've selected the Prepare Run tab, the user needs to do two things. First of all, the user needs to come over, move their cursor over here to the Choose Location button. They need to select that button and then do two things. First of all, they need to select a location where they would like to download the data. In this case, we're going to download this data to our desktop. Secondly, they need to provide a name for this data. We're going to call this military expenditure data 2. And then the final thing is we're going to tell the computer and tell NewGene that this is CSV data. So we're going to put CSV.csv at the end of the file name. Now we'll click Save. You can see that now the file path, as well as the file name and .csv, is at the end of the file. At this point, we're ready to do the second thing, which is to hit the Generate Output button. Now one should notice that the status window here is reporting the status of this particular run. Several pieces of information are worth noting. First of all, it tells you that this run will take 7 steps. And currently it's on step 4. It's now moved to step 5. The second thing is that it'll tell you right here exactly what is happening with this step. The next thing that's worth noting is down at the bottom. There's 3 indicators at the bottom of the progress of this run. The first one is this area where it tells you the number of rows that are being generated. The second is down here, where it provides a visual and a numerical indicator of the progress of this run. So what we'll do is we'll wait for NewGene to finish this run before showing the next steps. Okay, NewGene is now finished, and conveniently enough, it tells you that indeed it is done. At this point, we can go to the desktop, and right here is where the data file, military expenditure data 2, has appeared. And indeed, it's already in comma separated value file format. So if I click on it, it will then open up the data set and make it possible to see it. You can see that the data set is already formatted in a way that is usable for us to be able to conduct analysis. Specifically, all the variables have been placed into separate columns. Now let's take a moment to actually consider the variables that have been generated. First of all, we have country code 1, country code 2, thereby indicating that this is indeed dyadic data. Next, we'll notice that there's year 1 and year 2. Now, year 1 and year 2 are duplicate variables. Year 1 is corresponding to country code 1, year 2 is corresponding to country code 2. But since these are duplicate variables, we can actually just delete year 2. That now leaves us with the following variables. We can now see that we have, for country code 1, in the year 1900, its level of military expenditure. And for country 2, in the year 1900, we have its level of military expenditure. This concludes this demonstration of how to use NewGene to create a basic data set. In subsequent videos, I'll demonstrate how to use NewGene to create more complex data sets.